Exclusive contract with Feilu Novel Network Novel. Hong Kong film. Becoming a tycoon from Angry Case Qiu Gangao travels to the world of Hong Kong integration. I found myself sitting in the defendant's seat in the court. And he crossed over to become a senior inspector with the same name and surname, Qiu Gangao. Betrayed by brothers, abandoned by superiors, and imprisoned at the beginning. This kind of hell starts. But fortunately, the system has awakened. Qiu Gangao remembered his enemies one by one in court. For the sake of so-called justice, the double standard of not helping brothers * Zhang Chongbang.Promotions are up to oneself, and the blame is left to the subordinate Situ Jie.And there's also Huo Zhaotang, one of the four major families who thought he could cover up the sky with one hand and repay the kindness with one hand. After entering Stanley Prison, he subdued one ruthless person after another and even remotely controlled his career inside and outside. From then on, a raging and fierce hero began to rise from Stanley Prison. From the real estate market to the stock market, from underground to above ground, from Hong Kong Island to the world, Qiu Gangao covers the sky with one hand. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 2. Judgment. 6 years of imprisonment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a moment. The judge sitting tall spoke up. After the jury's discussion. I hereby make the final judgment. After trial, the evidence of the defendant's former police officer Qiu Gangao and his subordinate's accidental homicide is established. As a police officer, he knowingly violated the law. This court declares that the 6 defendants will serve in Stanley for a period of 6 years. However, considering that the 6 prisoners are former police officers, some things need to be registered with the police station and taken to the police station first. After 3 days, they will be taken to Stanley Prison. Ah-1, Uncle Quan, Huo Zai, Bao Zhu, and Gongzi collapsed into chairs when they heard Stanley Prison, with only timidity and fear in their eyes, and even their bodies trembling uncontrollably, perhaps angry or truly afraid. The prisoners detained in Stanley Prison are all members of those clubs. Their serious crime unit has already offended many people, but are there still few who have been sent in by them? And you need to know. Inside Stanley is a small society. The person wearing red shoes who goes in will be targeted by everyone. At this moment, Qiu Gangao's face remained expressionless. He looked at Zhang Chongbang next to him, followed by Situ Jie and Huo Zhaotang. The faces and expressions of these people he wanted to remember would one day make them repay him even more. After a while, 6 police officers handcuffed Qiu Gangao and others away. Within the police station. Just as Qiu Gangao and his 6 companions walked into the police station, they noticed a live TV broadcast on the wall. The interviewee was undoubtedly Situ Jie. Captain Situ, do you have anything to say about this matter? Situ Jie apologized on his face and said with mixed emotions. I was also deeply surprised by the appearance of black police officers in the police force. I have a great responsibility for the police force's dereliction of duty this time, but please believe in our police. We will also severely punish those illegal police officers in this matter. Our police officers' responsibility is to protect the safety of the people, not to threaten their safety. That's right, I have repeatedly asked them to solve the case quickly, but I did not let them abuse their private activities, let alone let them kill people. Hong Kong Island follows the law, and everything will naturally have a legal trial. Our police have no right to decide the life or death of prisoners. The police station is a place that upholds justice and will never tolerate any lawless police officers. Qiu Gangao and his companions stood still, staring at the TV hanging on the wall. At this moment, An roared angrily. Situ Jie, this scumbag, TMD, bastard. After he finished speaking, he was about to explode, and so were Tsuan Shu, Huo Zai, Bao Zhu, and young master on the side. They worked hard for Situ Jie, and in the end, all the credit fell on him, but the blame was on them. Bao Zhu looked at Situ Jie on TV and roared angrily. You bastard, you must die hard. Qiu Gangao watched as the corners of Situ Jie's mouth slightly raised, his killing intent in his eyes not concealed at all. People around him also felt the killing intent emanating from him, and they all took a half step back, afraid to move forward. At this moment, Yuan Jiabao, who had just entered, saw this scene and quickly walked towards them, saying to the police beside him. What are you still waiting for? Hurry up and bring them into the interrogation room. The police officers on the side heard Yuan Jiabao speaking and quickly brought Qiu Gangao and others into the interrogation room. At this moment, Qiu Gangao's remaining light noticed Zhang Chongbang standing at the door. Looking at Zhang Chongbang, his mind couldn't help but think of the later plot. Zhang Chongbang shot at the flying tigers to save his wife, and everyone came out to help him. Now, help him plead, help him break the rules. The key is that Zhang Chongbang gladly accepted it. And now, they had an accident, and with so many people in the police force, not a single one came out to speak. After so many years of police service, they are still stars of tomorrow. Is this what is called justice? Rules. Haha. It's just a joke. At this thought, he suddenly smiled, with a slightly eerie smile. Later on, he was personally sent to prison by his own brother, and the thought of this made his heart feel a chill. Perhaps it was only after receiving Qiu Gangao's memory that he could understand why he had become completely blackened. He knew that this was just the beginning, and the 6 years of imprisonment would transform him into a true devil. At this moment, Zhang Chongbang also looked at Qiu Gangao and the others, with a bad expression on his face and reluctance in his heart. After all, he brought Qiu Gangao into the police force, but he did not regret it. If you do something wrong, you must take responsibility for the consequences. Ding ding ding. Just 2 steps away, Huo Zai's phone rang. As soon as he took out his phone, the police officer beside him scolded. Can't answer the phone. The other few people heard this and looked angrily at the talking police officer, pointing at him and exclaiming angrily. What are you saying? The police officer immediately became hesitant as he watched them, and then Yuan Jiabao beside him said calmly. Let him pick it up. Huo Zai pressed the answer button, put his phone to his ear, and before he could speak, a female voice came from the phone. Ah Hua, are you doing this? Just now, a bunch of police officers broke into our house, carrying a search warrant, saying you took bribes. Give it back. Our bank cards have been frozen. Huo Zai was immediately confused upon hearing this, when another girl's cry came from the phone. The phone slipped directly off his phone, and then he grabbed onto Yuan Jiabao's collar and shouted angrily. What do you mean? Yuan Jiabao looked bewildered, and they all heard the sound of the phone, but he really didn't know about it. Zhang Chongbang saw this scene at the door and quickly rushed over, saying. What's going on? Let go. After speaking, he walked over to Huo Zai and Yuan Jiabao, pulling them apart. Uncle Quan walked up to Huo Zai and said. Ah Hua, please calm down. They don't have the right to issue a search warrant if they follow us. Ah Hua also calmed down at this moment. Yes, they didn't have the ability to obtain a search warrant, Situ Jie shouted angrily at the thought. I want to see Situ Jie. At this moment, an assistant next to Situ Jie walked up to them and sneered. Don't think about it, Inspector Situ won't see you scumbags. By the way, your family member's preferential treatment has also been suspended this morning. Since you are no longer a police officer, there is no need to enjoy police treatment. After finishing speaking, he was about to leave. Just as he turned around and hadn't taken 2 steps, he continued. It's okay, for the next 6 years you'll still be eating national food. After speaking, he walked towards the door of the key case department. Huo Zai and a few others shouted at Situ Jie's assistant. Pump the street. What do you mean by him? That assistant didn't pay any attention to them at all. Qiu Gangao's eyes were sharp and he spoke calmly. We have recorded today's account. Situ Jie's assistant heard Qiu Gangao's words and sneered with a disdainful smile on his face. Let's talk about it if you can come out alive. Chapter 3. I won't make you wait too long. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. In the interrogation room. 5 people collapsed in their seats. Because the verdict has already been made, I don't care about what kind of collusion or not. At this point, Qiu Gangao sat on the chair, looking ahead expressionlessly, like a wooden figure. In his past life, he was an A-level assassin with a calm mind and the ability to remain calm in the face of any crisis. Now he is very clear. To survive in Stanley, he needs strength. The power that makes people feel fearful, with his current strength, it is still somewhat difficult to bring them out of Stanley. Ding. System activation in progress. Congratulations to the host for activating the Peerless Owl system. Get a beginner's gift pack. Is the host open? Just as he was pondering how to deal with prison life, an electronic sound suddenly rang out in his mind. Listening to the pleasant electronic sound in his mind, a wicked smile appeared on his face and he secretly thought to himself. Sure enough, I also have a system. With the assistance of the system now, my plans will be much easier in the future. He didn't even think about it and responded directly in his mind. Open. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Divine Spear Fighting Art. Including Divine Spear Art and Close Range Spear Art, congratulations to the host for obtaining the Grandmaster Level Ancient Martial 8 Extremes Fist. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Grandmaster Level 12 Paths Tan Leg. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a Body Fortifier. Strengthening 10 times physical fitness without any side effects, ding. The task system is turned on. Task. Dominate Warehouse 1 in Zone A of Stanley Prison. Task reward. Skill. Loyalty I, can check the loyalty of people around you and increase their loyalty by 20%. As soon as the words fell, fragments of gun fighting, 8 extremes fist, and 12 paths of tan leg surged into my mind like a tide. Wait a moment. Those fragments of memory burned into his mind, as if he had practiced day after day, without any sense of discord. After receiving these memory fragments, a bottle of potion suddenly appeared in his palm, resembling a small bottle of glucose syrup. He took out the potion and drank it without any hesitation. As soon as he drank it, the bottle in his hand disappeared without a trace. At the same time, a warm heat emanated from his body, with every joint warm and every breath beginning to rush. He could clearly feel the cells in his body constantly compressing, regenerating, and blood boiling. Half a minute later, he slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, he was like a rebirth, filled with emotions. He clenched his fists, feeling the convergence of power. His eyes showed a fierce gaze. Yes, this was the power he longed for in his heart. Then he closed his eyes and felt the changes in his body. At this moment, he could clearly feel the changes in both his body and facial features. With his hearing alone, he could achieve the ability to distinguish between sound and position. In a moment, he stood up from the chair, turned around and faced several brothers, slowly sat down, and looked at their faces, saying calmly, "Are you afraid?" When everyone heard Qiu Gangao's words, they all lowered their heads and did not answer. It should be said that they did not know how to answer. After a while, they didn't speak. Qiu Gangao himself also knew that no one would be afraid. It was Stanley Prison, not a prison from previous movies. It was the largest prison on Hong Kong Island, and the prisoners they personally sent in couldn't even count themselves. If they were to go to Stanley now, it would be false to say they were not afraid. On glanced at Qiu Gangao and spoke urgently. "Aoj, we can't go. It's obvious that Situ Jie framed us and made us bear the blame. If we go in, we may not be able to come out. After speaking, he looked at the crowd with a hint of tears in his eyes and said weakly, "It will be fatal." When everyone heard Ah Wen's words, their faces became solemn. Situ Jie was framing them, but what could be done? They have no choice now, and he is right. Going this time may be more ominous than good. On continued. No, none of us can go. After speaking, he will walk towards the door. Qiu Gangao grabbed his hand and knew that On would definitely act too aggressively for them, so he couldn't let him go out and must appease them. Thinking of this, he quickly withdrew his thoughts and said, "Listen to me, there's a way." "You believe me." At this moment, they all looked at Qiu Gangao. He continued speaking. "You believe me, there's a way. I will take you out." Upon hearing Qiu Gangao's words, On finally calmed down. They all know that Aoj didn't want them to do something foolish, that's why he comforted them like this. If there's a way, they won't stay here anymore. But they also didn't expose it. He placed one hand on his chest and the other on Alvin's shoulder, promising again. On, Baozhu, Ahua, Gongzi, Quan Shu. You just need to believe me, don't worry about anything else. Within 3 years, I will definitely lead you out of Stanley with integrity. It doesn't even take 3 years. Qiu Gangao now has invincible confidence. After all, there are systems and so many skills. Speaking of 3 years, I'm just afraid they won't believe it. Actually, why do we need 3 years? Not needed for a year. Up to 6 months. After speaking, he looked at On and the others and nodded slightly. On and the others looked at Qiu Gangao with such confidence, and a glimmer of hope ignited in their hearts, saying in unison. Aoj, we believe in you. Qiu Gangao nodded slightly and said in a very plain tone. It won't be too long. Although his tone was very plain, they felt unprecedented confidence from his words. At the same time, the police officers in the monitoring room laughed out loud when they heard Qiu Gangao's words. One of the police officers holding coffee smiled and said, I seem to have heard a big joke. After speaking, he imitated Qiu Gangao's words and said, Believe me, I will definitely lead you out of Stanley in no more than 3 years. The other police officer who was riding with him sneered. 3 years, I'll bet you that they won't survive for 3 days. These years have made them stand out. What else are you saying, the police force's star of tomorrow, now? It's simply a shame to the police force. After speaking, he burst into laughter. Chapter 1. Choosing Brothers. Or choose so. Called Justice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Chongbang, Senior Inspector, according to the confessions of 6 suspects, you witnessed the entire process on that day. Have you personally witnessed the deceased resisting arrest and falling to the ground and dying? Qiu Gangao, who was sitting in the defendant's seat, was a bit confused when he heard this passage, as if he had heard it somewhere before. He opened his eyes slightly and looked around, feeling very puzzled. Looking at the unfamiliar environment, he felt a bit at a loss. Didn't I just finish my killer mission and find a girl to relax at the hotel? How did it appear in court? At this moment, countless fragments of memory suddenly appeared in his mind, and after a moment, he finally understood. It turned out that he had traveled to the world of Hong Kong, and through Qiu Gangao's memory, he learned that it was a diverse world. Here, Hongxing Society, Dongxing Society, Triad Society, Snake Gang, Federation, and so on were all in this time period. Thinking of this, a hint of excitement surged in his heart. In his past life, he was a staunch fan of Hong Kong films. Now that he has traveled to this world, he is determined to break through his own world. After excitement, he realized his situation. I traveled to Qiu Gangao, who had the same name and surname. Moreover, according to the plot, the original owner, as a senior inspector, committed manslaughter through negligence, was abandoned by his superiors, and then personally sent to prison by his good brother. This is simply the beginning of hell. However, it's okay. In the movie, even Qiu Gangao can come out alive, why can't he? I am familiar with various plotlines and not only need to step out well, but also rewrite the ending. Then he withdrew his thoughts, turned his head slightly, and looked at Zhang Chongbang sitting in the witness box. He knew that Zhang Chongbang would not speak for himself for the justice in his own heart. At this moment, the team members sitting next to him were all focused on Zhang Chongbang, with nervous expressions on their faces and rapid breathing. They all knew from the bottom of their hearts that they had been abandoned by Situ Jie. The only one who could save them now was Zhang Chongbang. As long as he said he didn't, they would be released without charge. At most, returning to the police station means taking a disciplinary action. Taking a disciplinary action is better than going to jail. They have been police officers for so many years, and they don't even know how many prisoners they have caught. If they really go to jail, what will be waiting for them? The outcome can be imagined. At the same time, when facing the judge, Zhang Chongbang did not give an answer. Instead, he looked at Qiu Gangao on the defendant's bench. Soon, he withdrew his gaze, supported the microphone in front of him with his hand, and slowly spoke. First of all, I want to emphasize that night, halfway through, the lawyer beside him interrupted and spoke to the judge on the high platform. Your Excellency, the witness deliberately avoided the question. I just asked if he had witnessed the prisoner's arrest with his own eyes. The judge looked at Zhang Chongbang and supported the microphone, saying, Witness, please answer truthfully. Zhang Chongbang looked at the judge sitting high, feeling a dilemma in his heart. At this moment, he remembered the witness oath he had just taken in his mind, lowered his head slightly, paused for a moment, and spoke with some embarrassment. I hadn't arrived at the scene yet. The lawyer heard his answer and continued to ask. Have you seen 6 defendants physically assaulting the deceased while? As soon as these words were spoken, the several people sitting in the defendant's seat were all staring at Zhang Chongbang. At this moment, their hearts were also raised to their throats. Except for Qiu Gangao sitting at the innermost, there was no expression on his face and no emotion in his eyes. Zhang Chongbang looked at the defendant's seat, his eyes full of struggle, with justice on one side and brothers on the other. However, soon he withdrew his gaze, thought for a moment, and spoke in response. He is an extremely dangerous criminal, and I believe that our police must use a considerable amount of force to deal with him. The lawyer raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard his words and repeated. A considerable degree of force. He looked at the defendant's seat and then spoke again. What is a considerable degree of force? Let's not speculate whether it is a considerable degree of force. Just answer me, have you seen the defendant play? As he spoke, he walked towards Zhang Chongbang and leaned his hands on the podium, then reminded him. However, Inspector Zhang, I would like to remind you here that you are testifying under oath now. Zhang Chongbang glanced at the lawyer in front of him, but he quickly shifted his gaze and stared blankly ahead. In his mind was a picture of himself just taking the oath, and soon he regained his senses and turned his head to look at Qiu Gangao, just as his eyes met each other. Qiu Gangao, who was sitting in the defendant's seat, looked at Zhang Chongbang with no emotion in his eyes. However, his breathing began to quicken and his heart became a bit nervous. Perhaps due to this physical condition, even if he knew the outcome, his heart was still very suppressed at this moment. Zhang Chongbang knew that he could save them with just one word, but this also went against his police philosophy. Everyone who made a mistake had to pay a price, and the police were no exception. At this moment, the lawyer beside him asked in a cold voice. Do you have it or not? The judge on stage saw that Zhang Chongbang had not answered for a long time, so he spoke up. Witness, please answer truthfully. Zhang Chongbang regained his senses when he heard the lawyer and judge's words. He withdrew his gaze and placed his hand on the microphone, feeling somewhat bewildered. His mouth opened and closed without making any sound. His face always showed an expression of frustration, but for the sake of justice in his heart, he had to say, let out a slight sigh, and then he squeezed out a word from between his teeth. After speaking, he lowered his head and dared not look at the defendant's seat. The lawyer heard his return and said directly, "Thank you." At the same time, Qiu Gangao and a few others in the defendant's seat collapsed in their chairs when they heard Zhang Chongbang's words. Bao Zhu and Quan sighed helplessly, while Wen faced each other with his hands. They were all at a loss, but their eyes were full of disbelief. The huge police force, surprisingly, had no one to help them. Looking back on these years of police career is simply a joke. Qiu Gangao looked at Zhang Chongbang with a cold expression, devoid of any warmth. He could no longer control the suppressed emotions in his heart, wanting to vent but unable to do so. The court was originally a rather oppressive venue. Perhaps Qiu Gangao's memory is too profound, causing him to have a blank brain now. Sitting quietly on the chair, taking a long breath, Shang Yang, who couldn't control his mouth, fell down again. It took him a while before he calmed down. Chapter 4. Stanley Prison, Can We Lock the Dragon? You are listening at novelfull.audio. 3 days later. Early morning. In the interrogation room. A police officer opened the door and shouted inside. "Wake up, it's time to go." As soon as the conversation ended, 3 fully armed police officers walked into the interrogation room and walked up to Qiu Gangao and others, putting handcuffs and ankle chains on them one by one. They didn't resist either, and after a few days of guidance from Qiu Gangao, they all figured it out. At this moment, they had no fear on their faces and walked out of the interrogation room with their heads held high and their chests held high. In no time, they walked to the entrance of the police station and looked at the prison car with disdain in their eyes. At this moment, a man in a green police uniform glanced at Qiu Gangao and the others, with a faint smile on his lips. He was secretly pleased that it was actually them. He withdrew his thoughts and spoke loudly. "Take it away." After speaking, the police took Qiu Gangao and others onto the car. As the engine starts, the vehicle also moves away. Inside the car, Killer Xiong sat beside Qiu Gangao with a smile on his face and said calmly, "Ah sir, long time no see." After speaking, he looked at Qiu Gangao. Qiu Gangao ignored the killer bear, so it can be said that he disdained it. The assassin Xiong didn't pay attention to himself and didn't care, but instead continued. Sir, don't worry, we are both colleagues. I will definitely take good care of you in prison." After speaking, he showed a chilling smile. When Qiu Gangao heard his words, he just smiled slightly, and his murderous aura emanated directly from his body. Suddenly, the temperature inside the car dropped, and the murderous intent in his eyes was not concealed at all. The killer bear immediately felt the killing intent, and at this moment, he was in a difficult situation. He had originally intended to give them a boost, but he did not expect Qiu Gangao to remain so arrogant and domineering. Now he dare not move at all. In front of him, the killer bear truly felt the smell of death, as if his life and death were in his hands, which made him swallow his saliva. Qiu Gangao withdrew his killing intent and said very plainly, "You'd better think carefully about what tone to use when speaking next time. I don't want to remind you again." At this moment, the killer bear heard his words and his expression on his face was as ugly as if he had eaten meat Tiangong. He didn't speak and dared not speak. Even if Qiu Gangao was handcuffed, he wanted to kill himself, but he couldn't resist it. He had seen his skills with his own eyes. At this moment, he said fiercely in his heart, "TMD, you bastard. Wait for me. When you arrive at Stanley, there's no need for me to take action. Naturally, someone will take your life." After 3 hours, the car drove up a cliff along the road, and after turning over the bay, a prison suddenly appeared in front of it. The vehicle has just entered the prison. New people are coming. The guard at the door shouted. Beep. Gather, all squat down. The prison guard inside quickly blew a whistle around his neck and shouted when he saw the vehicle driving in. The vehicle slowly came to a stop. Killer Xiong and the police walked down first, followed by Qiu Gangao and others. Qiu Gangao and his 6 companions got off the car and looked around. There were high walls all around, and prison guards with shotguns were patrolling the walls. There were lighthouses around each side. There is also a police force at the entrance, all fully armed. The killer bear said to the prison guard beside him. Take them to collect things. The prison guard nodded and said. Yes, sir. After speaking, he led Qiu Gangao and others to the examination room. Every person entering Stanley must go to a place, even if their predecessor was a police officer. Many people on the playground recognized Qiu Gangao, and their enemies were particularly envious when they met. They were very excited at this moment. Looking at the backs of the few of them with fiery eyes. The killer bear naturally saw it and secretly thought to himself. I said you don't have to do it yourself, someone will take your life. Dare to threaten me. Humph, I want you to live better than die. At this thought, a hint of cruelty appeared in his eyes. Half an hour later. A prison guard led the 6 of them into the cell and walked them through the cell. They walked in the corridor of the prison cell, with those sins leaning against the iron gate, smiling as they looked at the 6 of Qiu Gangao. Some big shots just spoke up. Sir, why did you come in? After speaking, a hint of killing intent appeared in his eyes. Qiu Gangao looked at him like a dog, with no change in his face. Behind him, Ah-Wen and others looked at the ferocious criminals and felt a little uneasy. However, following Aoge's side, they did not hesitate. They walked to the innermost part of the prison with the prison guard, who opened the iron door and said to them. Go in, from today on, you guys are staying here. Qiu Gangao didn't speak and walked into the classroom with On and others. After they entered the prison room, the prison guard locked the door. Shouted into the room. You all be honest. Do you hear me? The prisoners in the prison quickly nodded and laughed heartily. Don't worry, we are good friends with Asir. After speaking, he looked at Qiu Gangao and others. As soon as the prison guard left, all the prisoners in the prison wanted to come up. The person who had just talked to the prison guard saw them all gathered around and quickly scolded. What do you want to do? Get out of here. Demi Gu and the blind snake have not returned yet, why are you in such a hurry? The words have just finished. The blind snake and Dami walked into the classroom. Dami smiled and said. What are you doing? We are old acquaintances with Asir, why don't we just get out of here? Let Asir rest well, let's treat him to a big meal tonight. As soon as everyone heard this, a slight smile appeared on their faces. Everyone stepped aside. Chapter 5. Tonight, you must die. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After dinner. Qiu Gangao and the others returned to the classroom, and Demi sitting on the bed saw Qiu Gangao and the others return. She quickly sat up and looked at them with a smile on her face. In his spare time, he saw his younger brother smoking next to him and kicked him over, saying in a sullen tone. TMD, didn't you see Asir not smoking? I don't have any eye power. After speaking, he lifted his foot and kicked towards the little brother. The younger brother next to him quickly understood and arrogantly walked up to Qiu Gangao, handing the cigarette to him. Qiu Gangao looked at the cigarette in front of him, smiled slightly, didn't speak, and also didn't answer. Demi saw that he didn't answer and said meaningfully. Asir, don't worry about smoking. After today, you may not have a chance to smoke. After speaking, a lewd smile appeared on his face. At this moment, Qiu Gangao seemed to be a corpse in his eyes, without any threat. When Qiu Gangao heard Demi's words, he raised his head slightly and looked over at the little brother in front of him. His mouth slightly curved, revealing a disdainful smile. He certainly knew what Dammy meant, but he didn't care. The reason why Dammy dared to say that was not because of the support of the club. Besides, occasionally bumping around in prison is normal, and it doesn't matter if it's a bit more serious. As long as the money is in place, this is not a problem, and Dammy's words can be considered a blatant threat. However, at this time, Qiu Gangao did not even take these people seriously. 10 times the physical fitness, if you want to step out of Stanley in just a few minutes, who can stop you? Then he put away his thoughts, took the cigarette in front of him, lit it, and walked towards the bed. Alvin and the others naturally knew what Dammy meant, but since they came in, they were naturally mentally prepared. Even if they lost their lives tonight, they would never give in. At this moment, the blind snake led the person into the classroom, with a smile on its face. It waved its hand at the young man behind it, who took out 10 packs of cigarettes directly. He pointed at those cigarettes and smiled, saying to the people in the classroom, "I'm in a good mood today. I smoke these cigarettes casually." After he finished speaking, he asked the younger brother to go smoke. At this moment, the blind snake looked at Qiu Gangao and his 6 companions with eager eyes, their gaze like that of a jackal and a lamb. "Blind snake, with so much smoke, this is a waste of blood." Dammy looked at the blind snake with a smile on her face. The blind snake heard Dammy's voice and then shifted its gaze away from the bodies of Qiu Gangao and others, and laughed heartily. "What does all this smoke count towards our Viper gang? Today is the first day for several Asirs to come here. We can't let Asir suffer any injustice." Dammy looked at the blind snake, just smiling and not speaking. They all had the same goal, which was to kill Qiu Gangao, so he had nothing to do. At this moment, On and his companions walked up to Qiu Gangao's side and whispered, "Aoj, what should we do now?" Qiu Gangao smiled slightly and remained silent. At this moment, Bao Zhu looked at the proud expression of Dammy and Blind Snake and said fiercely, "What should we do? What else can we do? Tonight either they die or we die." On and others nodded slightly, whether they could survive or not depends on tonight. Qiu Gangao shook his head and smiled slightly as he watched them face death as if they were returning home. He placed one hand on On's shoulder and said calmly, "Don't worry, none of us will die." He didn't deliberately lower his voice, but instead raised it a few keys so that everyone in the cell could hear him. Dammy and Blind Snake laughed out loud when they heard Qiu Gangao's words, but they didn't say anything either. Will the 40 of them not be able to beat the 6 of them? They have the determination to win this battle. 2 hours later. A prison guard walked up to the iron door with a baton, knocked on the door, and said, "I'll turn off the lights soon, be honest at night." Dammy sat by the bed, legs crossed, smoking a cigarette in her mouth, and said with a smile, "We have always been very honest." The prison guard did not answer the call, but spoke on his own. "I went to bed early today and also slept soundly. Don't make any trouble." Upon hearing these words, Dammy and Blind Snake immediately understood what they meant. The 2 of them quickly said to the little brother behind them, "Do you hear me? Please be quiet for me." The prison guard smiled slightly and then left. Section Chief's Office. The killer bear sat on the chair, counting the money on the table, and the smile on his face never disappeared. Dong dong dong. At this moment, the sound of knocking on the door entered the office. The killer bear's smile instantly disappeared, and he looked cautiously at the door, putting the money in the drawer. After he put all the money in the drawer, he slowly spoke up. "Enter." The prison guard at the door heard the sound of the killer bear and quickly pushed the door in. Smiling, he walked up to the killer bear. The assassin bear looked at the prison guard in front of him and said angrily, "What are you doing here?" The prison guard paused upon hearing his words and shamelessly said, "Brother Xiong, don't worry, Qiu Gangao and the others won't survive tonight." Upon hearing this, the assassin Xiong raised his eyebrows slightly. He also wanted to retaliate against Qiu Gangao and the others, but due to his identity, he was not good at taking action, so he was just waiting for the opportunity. He certainly knows what it means. They are already arrogant and domineering in their actions, and there will only be many people who offend them. Now that they are in prison, there must be many people who want revenge. It seems that some people can't help but take action. But he still pretended to be inexplicable and asked. What do you mean? The prison guard on the side bent slightly and answered with a smile. Dammy and the blind snake were caught by Qiu Gangao himself. They can't wait a long time. Killer Bear looked at the prison guard in front of him and chuckled faintly. You're very sensible. The prison guard was overjoyed when he heard the Killer Bear's words, and he bent down a bit and said. It's my honor to share the worries of the department head. P.S. Find some flowers and reviews, free data, brothers. Chapter 6. Slash the bones for Asirs. Give me a call. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Killer Bear didn't speak, took out some money from the drawer, threw it to the prison guard in front, and continued speaking. Watch it, don't all die. The prison guard in front of him quickly picked up the money on the ground, stood straight, and responded. Yes, sir. After speaking, he walked out of the office. After a while, he walked in the hallway of the prison, looking at the Hong Kong dollar in his hand, overjoyed. He didn't expect to have money just by talking to the Killer Bear, which was simply too satisfying. When he went to the police station to pick up Qiu Gangao, he was also present. At that time, he could see the Killer Bear's killing intent. At that time, he didn't know what to do, until today when he sent Qiu Gangao and the others to the squad room. Only then did he see the turning point, and both Dammy and Blind Snake had a grudge against them. At the same time, he knew that Blind Snake and Dammy would not let them go. This is just right, they put in their effort and take the benefits themselves, just thinking about it makes them happy. Inside Warehouse 1. Dammy and the Blind Snake got up from the bed and knocked on the iron bed. The little brother on the bed heard a sound and quickly jumped out of the bed, walking to the bed of Qiu Gangao and others. At this moment, Dammy and the Blind Snake calmly walked through the crowd to their bed. Smiling, he said. Sir, it's time to get up and have a big meal. Qiu Gangao calmly got up from the car, glanced at the big cat and Blind Snake in front of him, and spoke calmly. You're looking for death. Dammy and the Blind Snake chuckled when they heard his words. The Blind Snake said bareheaded. Qiu Gangao, now you are no longer a police officer. What are you crazy about? After finishing speaking, he turned his head to look at the little brothers around him, waved his hand, and continued speaking. I know you can fight, but today I want to see how good you are. At this moment, the Blind Snake had a triumphant expression on its face. With over 40 people, how many more could Qiu Gangao fight? Demi looked at Qiu Gangao and comforted him. Sir, don't worry, only one will die tonight. We won't let you die so easily. That would be too boring. At this moment, Bao Zhu was already burning with anger and pointed at Dammy fiercely. TMD, if I can beat you down once, I can beat you down again. As soon as Demi heard Bao Zhu's words, he suddenly felt a burning sensation on his face. His spare light glanced at the little brothers around him, only to see someone still holding back a smile. His face is a disgrace. If it weren't tough enough tonight, he wouldn't have the face to be the boss. The most important thing for those who live in the martial arts world is face. Without face, wanting to live in the martial arts world is simply fantastic. So he must die, and thinking of this, his eyes showed a hint of killing intent as he gritted his teeth and said. Come on, loosen Asir's bones. After speaking, he waved his hand to the little brother behind him. The younger brother saw Demi waving his hand and raised his fist to directly pounce on Qiu Gangao and others. Without saying a word, Qiu Gangao kicked his younger brother in the chest. The younger brother behind only felt a fierce charge pressing against him, and even if they exerted all their strength, they could not shake this force. Everyone retreated one after another, and the person at the back collided with the wall before stopping. The young man at the forefront is now leaning on someone else, his limbs constantly twitching and his mouth spitting blood. At first glance, everyone froze in place, afraid to take a step forward. Dami and the blind snake were also surprised. They never expected Qiu Gangao to be so fierce, but they were just surprised because there were so many people on their side. They will die tonight. An and the others beside Qiu Gangao were also extremely shocked, and they watched this scene. They have been together with Qiu Gangao for so many years, and each other's background is extremely familiar. Now they look at Qiu Gangao in front of them, their eyes full of unfamiliarity. But in this situation, they didn't think so much either. Qiu Gangao looked at Dami and the blind snake, and his murderous aura burst out. In an instant, the temperature in the classroom plummeted. Dami and the blind snake immediately felt endless killing intent, with a thumping sensation in their hearts, like falling into an ice cave. They instinctively swallowed their saliva, and their own killing intent was like a joke compared to Qiu Gangao's. Dami and the blind snake exchanged a glance at each other, boldly speaking. "Pretend to be, today is your deadline. You can't change this ending." Qiu Gangao gave a slight smile, which was very cold and devoid of any emotion. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "Since you're looking for death, then go ahead and die." The blind snake snorted coldly upon hearing his words and said, "Want to scare me, dream. Brothers, go up together." The younger brother behind them looked at each other and dared not take action, but even the older brother spoke up and they dared not refuse. Therefore, they could only grit their teeth and rush towards Qiu Gangao and the others. There was no expression on Qiu Gangao's face, only endless killing intent. As he swung his fist towards him, he just stepped back and easily dodged. These moves were like turtle speed in his eyes, without any threat. He gave an elbow strike and fiercely attacked the little brother's chest. After hearing a howl of sorrow, he flew backwards and collapsed to the ground. He looked at his little brother who was lying on the ground, and roared from the bottom of his heart. "Isn't that right? Can't you help but fight? I only used 10% of my strength." The blind snake snorted to the little brother next to it. "Let's go up together, there are only 6 of them. Kill them." After he finished speaking, he took the wooden stick and rushed towards Qiu Gangao. Dami beside him also refused to be outdone and directly removed the iron rod from the bed, waving it towards Qiu Gangao. These wooden and iron rods, but they spent a lot of money to get them and hid them. You should know that obtaining weapons in the prison area is very difficult. The younger brothers around rushed towards Qiu Gangao's group of people as if they were not risking their lives. The blind snake fiercely hit Qiu Gangao's head with a wooden stick. He didn't hesitate, and just as the stick began to fall, an iron fist quickly hit the blind snake's face. He flew backwards before he could react. P.S. 10 o'clock on the first day, seeking flowers, giving feedback. Brothers, please support me. Chapter 7. Don't move, kneel down. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Demi caught a glimpse of the gap between Qiu Gangao's attacks and suddenly erupted, using all her strength to swing the iron rod in her hand and swiftly striking his head with lightning speed. He was certain that Qiu Gangao would not be able to react, and he was overjoyed. This time, I was going to become famous, and his face inexplicably became excited at the thought of Qiu Gangao's tragic situation. An and the others watched as the iron rod attacked Aoj, and their faces showed signs of anxiety. However, now they themselves are in danger. I can't escape at all, I can only shout at Aoj. Be careful, brother Ao. Qiu Gangao raised his head slightly and looked at the iron rod within reach, with a smile on his lips. An and his companions watched as the iron rod hit Aoj, causing their minds to go blank and panic for a moment. Bang! Everyone only heard a bang. The iron rod that hit Qiu Gangao stopped just 1 centimeter above his nose bridge, unable to take any closer. Dami was stunned when he saw this scene, but in just an instant, he came back to his senses. Watching his smile, my heart trembled as my pride vanished without a trace, replaced by fear. He no longer had the arrogance he had before, standing there dumbfounded. On and a few others were also stunned in the same place. What was the situation? Qiu Gangao gave a wicked smile and rushed straight to the little brother beside him. After 10 times strengthening his body, he is now the contemporary god of war, a god of killing and a demon of killing. On the other side. Duty room. The prison guard rested his feet on the table, drank tea, looked at the color magazine, and listened to the mournful cries coming from the classroom, feeling inexplicably happy in his heart. Even if they all die, the killer bear will not punish itself. He said not to all die, it's just a talk. The police are looking for death when they enter Stanley, and those criminals will definitely not let those police go. I just need to wait here and go collect the body in a while. My official career will definitely be smooth sailing in the future. Don't mention how happy he is when he thinks of this. In the classroom. At this moment, only 6 people, including Qiu Gangao, along with Dami and the blind snake, were still standing in the room. All the other little brothers were lying on the ground, their mouths constantly wailing in pain. On and others looked at Qiu Gangao's back and recalled the scene just now. They were all dumbfounded, but more importantly, they were amazed. Just now, Brother Ao was simply a devil in hell. None of those little brothers could withstand a punch from Brother Ao. At this moment, the blind snake and Dami stood in place, looking at Qiu Gangao in front of them, their bodies trembling uncontrollably, and beads of sweat as big as beans flowed down their heads. Even breathing feels very difficult. Qiu Gangao waved his hand, looked up slightly, glanced at the blind snake and Dami, and then stepped on the bodies of the prisoners to walk in front of Dami. One hand directly grabbed his neck, lifted him up, and said coldly, "How much strength do you think I need to kill you?" Dami tightly gripped Qiu Gangao's wrist with both hands, struggling with both feet. He watched as Dami struggled desperately, his eyes showing disdain. With a slight force, Dami felt the breath of death. At this moment, tears had already appeared in his eyes, and he looked at Qiu Gangao with a pleading gaze. The blind snake on the side was already frightened and stood in place, watching the big cat raised by Qiu Gangao. Pounce! He knelt down directly. Looking at Qiu Gangao with fear in his eyes, he knew in his heart that the next thing was him. He didn't want to die yet, and he finally sat in this seat. He is now more willing to sacrifice his life than anyone else. Qiu Gangao released his hand when he saw that he had achieved the desired effect. He wanted to go out, but these 2 useless people were still useful. As he let go and fell directly to the ground, he ignored the pain and took a deep breath of air. It took him a while to recover. He knelt directly at Qiu Gangao's feet and said trembling, "Aoj, I was wrong. I'm damn it. Please let me go for a while, and I will be your ox and horse in the future." Speaking, he still felt that he was not sincere enough and gave himself a big mouth, one after another. What is dignity? Is it important to have life? As the old saying goes, it's better to live than to die well, and besides, he doesn't want to die. The only thing he can do now is beg for mercy, begging Qiu Gangao to let him go. The blind snake behind him immediately regained consciousness when it saw the appearance of Dami, and crawled up to Qiu Gangao's feet. Learn from Dami's words and constantly slap yourself while begging for mercy. Qiu Gangao turned around to look at the 5 people of On and asked, "Is everything okay?" On and the 5 of them shook their heads slightly and replied in unison, "Aoj, we're fine." Qiu Gangao nodded slightly, then he took out a cigarette and a match from Dami's pocket, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it. At this point, a rapid sound of footsteps came from the door. In an instant, a prison guard rushed to the iron gate in a fit of anger. Just as he was about to start scolding, he saw an incredible scene. There were 6 people standing inside the classroom, with 2 kneeling on the ground, constantly begging for mercy, surrounded by unconscious people. There are still various bloodstains and traces of fighting on the ground. He opened his mouth wide, unable to say a word, feeling shocked in his heart. His mouth opened and closed without saying a word, and his soul was half lost. Looking at the scene inside the classroom, he instinctively retreated. He didn't come to his senses until he hit the wall and said with great difficulty, "How could this be possible? How could this be possible?" After finishing speaking, he turned around and ran out of the classroom, rushing towards the department head's office. Qiu Gangao knows what he wants to do, it's just looking for the killer bear. Just taking this opportunity to give him a warning. Then he put aside his thoughts and kicked Demi down, saying calmly, "Kneel well." After speaking, he stepped on his shoulder and gestured for him to lie down. Demi immediately understood and knelt on the ground like a dog. Qiu Gangao sat directly on it, smoking calmly, waiting for the arrival of the killer bear. P.S. Looking for some flowers and reviews. Brothers, give it some strength. Chapter 8. Just started, I'm waiting for you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The prison guard rushed into the killer bear's office with a look of fear on his face and stuttered. "Brother Xiong, it's not good." The killer bear was startled by the prison guard who suddenly broke in, and a hint of anger appeared on his face. However, it quickly disappeared and said with a smile, "What are you panicking about? It's normal for a few prisoners to die in prison." After speaking, he made a tactical tilt back and rested his feet on the table. He thought that Qiu Gangao and his companions had already died, but he couldn't help but have no worries. His heart was incredibly comfortable. When he cooperated with him to arrest the fugitive back then, his high and mighty appearance made him angry. He only made a mistake and then said it was worthless, making himself a joke among the prison guards. At this thought, a hint of malice appeared on his face and he murmured, "Unfortunately, it's too painful for them to die." At this moment, the prison guard tried to calm his emotions and said, "Brother Xiong, Dami and Blind Snake have failed. Qiu Gangao and a few others did not die." Upon hearing these words, the assassin Xiong rushed onto the stool and stood up, looking at the prison guard with an incredulous expression and questioning. How could it be possible? Dami and Blind Snake have so many people under their command, how could they not possibly deal with them? You make it clear. As he spoke, he walked up to the prison guards. The prison guard dared not delay and quickly said, "It's true, Dami and the Blind Snake are still begging for mercy from Qiu Gangao." Killer Xiong had already believed the prison guard in front of him, he had no reason to deceive himself, and he had also seen Qiu Gangao's skills. At this moment, a solemn expression appeared on his face and an inexplicable fear surged in his heart. But he didn't show it. He withdrew his thoughts and said to the prison guard beside him, "Go gather the team and come with me to take a look." The prison guard heard the killer bear's command and without saying a word, turned around and ran out of the office. In the classroom, Qiu Gangao was still leisurely smoking, quietly waiting for the arrival of the killer bear. Not for a while. The sound of neat footsteps could be heard in the corridor. The prison guard continued to walk at the front, trembling as he opened the prison door. Subsequently, the prison guard behind him rushed into the cell with a baton and shield in hand. Everyone instinctively took a step back when they saw the scene of the classroom pinching, while swallowing a mouthful of saliva. At this moment, Qiu Gangao, who was smoking on Demi's back, looked like a demon king in their eyes, with only one sentence of his own life. At this moment, the killer bear walked out from among the prison guards. Walking to the front of the team, he was also surprised to see the bloody scene in the classroom, and his face couldn't stop twitching. At this moment, his gaze was always on Dami, afraid to move up half a minute, and even more afraid to look at Qiu Gangao. Neither of them spoke. Qiu Gangao smoked on his own without paying any attention to the killer bear in front of him. For him, the killer bear is just a corpse, and it's only a matter of seconds for him to want to die. But he doesn't want to kill him yet, he's still useful. Besides, killing prison guards is a big deal and completely unnecessary. Killing the killer bear may have an impact on his plan. So now all I need to do is threaten him and make him be honest. Thinking of this, an invisible pressure spread from around Qiu Gangao and charged towards the killer bear, and everyone at the door felt the pressure, their hearts trembling. Even if the person in front of them didn't take any action, they felt like they were facing a formidable enemy. The killer bear was naturally the first to feel it. Apart from being intimidated, he also felt a killing intent aimed at himself. Now his mind is completely blank, with only one hope in his mind, which is to beg for mercy. However, he is a prison guard, how could he possibly beg for mercy from a prisoner? However, in the face of Qiu Gangao's killing intent, he had no courage to resist at all. He was very clear in his heart that Qiu Gangao only needed one blow to kill himself. Based on the miserable appearance of these people. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind, which was to escape from here. However, the fear in his heart completely froze him, and even if he tried his best, he couldn't move. Qiu Gangao threw his cigarette butt at the foot of the killer bear, looked up slightly, smiled slightly, and said in a very plain tone. "How many punches do you think you can hold on to me?" The killer bear was like a frightened lamb at this moment, and the moment Qiu Gangao's gaze fell on him, he noticed it. Sweat beads the size of beans kept popping out of my forehead, and my head lowered a bit. Hearing him speak, his whole body trembled for a moment, and he was desperately trying to control his body, unable to do so. His instinctive reaction is beyond his control. Faced with Qiu Gangao's blatant threat, he did not speak, to be precise, he dared not speak. Qiu Gangao sneered and walked over to the killer bear without speaking. The killer bear immediately panicked as he looked at Qiu Gangao, who was close at hand, and his breathing involuntarily became rapid. He looked at the killer bear with his head down in his spare time and said in a calm and emotionless voice. "This is the second time. I don't want a third time." As soon as the words fell into his eyes, a chill appeared. The killer bear heard his words and his pupils suddenly shrank. He knew he couldn't retreat, he was the boss here. If he retreated, no one in the entire prison would be able to hold them back. So he suppressed his fear and roared angrily at Qiu Gangao. "What do you mean? I'm the boss here." Qiu Gangao raised his eyebrows slightly upon hearing his words and looked disdainfully at the killer bear, but he did not speak. At this moment, the air seemed to freeze, and the two of them looked at each other. The killer bear tried to restrain his fear in his heart, not letting him see his fear, but seeing him not speaking. After a cold snort, he turned around and walked out of the classroom. Everyone could clearly see the killer bear's legs trembling. Qiu Gangao looked at his back and the corners of his mouth slightly raised, without saying anything. "It's only the first day now. My life in Stanley has just begun." Chapter 10. Man in Stanley, nicknamed Dragon King, 10 watches. You are listening at novelfull.audio. During class meals. Qiu Gangao sat on the bed, looking at the two kneeling people, and asked. "Tell me about the situation with Stanley. And who are the big shots from each district?" Dammy and the blind snake quickly climbed up to him and said. "Ay, we understand this. Stanley Prison is divided into 4 districts, A district, B district, C district, and D district. Approximately over 1,000 people are being held in each district. Each district has 10 more warehouses." Qiu Gangao nodded slightly, looked around, and asked. "Why are there only a few 50 people here?" The blind snake quickly explained. "Ay, we have paid, and this is the headquarters of our club. Only members of the snake gang can come in. Of course, there are also people from the snake gang in other talent pools, but they haven't been transferred over. They are in other warehouses' cigarette business. He became interested in the cigarette business as soon as he heard about it. He knew that cigarettes in prison were equivalent to money. Those cigarettes are mostly controlled by the club bosses. Those who don't have clubs and want to smoke, they have to exchange money with those club bosses for whatever they want. This way, it's like a small society, and the members of the club will definitely not mistreat those who are imprisoned for the club. They will naturally take care of everything. And they were also covered by clubs when they came in, so hardly anyone dared to touch them. Then he put away his thoughts and said, "There are those big shots controlling the cigarette business." Dammy and the blind snake were immediately confused upon hearing his words, but he quickly realized and secretly pondered in his heart. It seems that he wants to get involved in the cigarette business. However, in their eyes, Qiu Gangao's idea was undoubtedly seeking death. In Stanley, the cigarette business was controlled by the clubs. They won't easily give up their coveted goods. As long as anyone dares to covet the cigarette business, their big shots won't show mercy. Dammy withdrew her thoughts and quickly said, "AY, in Zone A, there are 6 bosses, namely Dashan, Dayton, Wango, Daquanlong, and the 2 of us. Zone B is under the jurisdiction of Shandong Leopard, including Away, Big ZG, Baizhou, Gewuki, and Pig Intestine. The strongest one in Zone A is Lost Dog, followed by Big Circle Dragon. Zone B is White Fried and Big Guy Base." Qiu Gangao nodded slightly. He also knew these people, but the only one he could attach a little importance to was the Big Circle Dragon. After all, the people of the Big Circle Dragon have all illegally crossed over from the mainland, and they have all served in the army with good skills, which cannot be compared to those of the Lost Dog. But the Quanlong has no ambition, he just wants to finish his sentence peacefully and walk out of prison with his brothers. At this moment, the blind snake saw that he was not speaking and tentatively asked, "AY, what do you want to do?" Qiu Gangao narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a cold tone, "Don't ask what shouldn't be asked. This can be deadly." After speaking, a meaningful expression appeared on his face. At this moment, Demi on the side smiled and said, "AY, blind snake doesn't mean that. He just said, if Mr. AO wants to start a gang here to recruit people. Just need a nickname, a title." The reason why he wanted to rescue the blind snake was to have some care in the future. Today, Qiu Gangao's performance is already frightening enough. If they still go their separate ways like before, then in the future when he builds his own power, they will definitely not have a good ending. No matter how much enmity they had before, they have now let go. As the boss, they must have a long-term vision and think for the future in everything they do. The blind snake quickly agreed and it heard Demi help it break free. "That's right. That's right." After speaking, he cast a grateful look at Demi. Qiu Gangao sneered and remained silent. Of course, he knows the little tricks of Dammy and the blind snake, and they must have seen their ambitions as the boss. But what if I see it out? What if I say it in front of all the big shots now? Who can be their own opponent? Here he is the heavens, and no one can provoke him. Then he withdrew his thoughts, paused, and asked with a playful tone, "Can you tell me what nickname to use?" Dammy and the blind snake exchanged a glance at each other when they heard his words. At this moment, they both understood that they had guessed correctly just now, and Qiu Gangao's ambition must be more than that. It's really interesting now. They know Qiu Gangao, but with so many leaders in the prison, wouldn't there be fewer people under their command? That's right. They are planning to use the hands of other big shots to kill Qiu Gangao and a few others. Even if Qiu Gangao is able to fight, can he defeat people in a district? At this point, An and the others standing behind Qiu Gangao were greatly surprised when they heard his words. They didn't even know that Aoj would have such thoughts. But now they all trust Qiu Gangao very much, and Ao Gu must have his own reasons for doing so. They just need to follow AOGE's command. Wait a moment. After thinking for a moment, Dami spoke up. Aoye, since your name contains the word AO, I think it's better to call it Dragon King Ao Guang. As soon as the words fell, the blind snake quickly agreed. That's right. Dragon King Ao Guang. Qiu Gangao murmured in his mouth. Dragon King Ao Guang. Then a faint smile appeared on his face and he said in a deep voice. Okay, just call it the Dragon King. After speaking, he waved his hand to Dami and the blind snake. Dami and the blind snake quickly walked away when they saw him wave their hands, as if forgiving a big matter. Before taking 2 steps, he spoke up. Let those prison guards come and clean up. Dami lowered her posture and responded. Dragon King, rest assured. After speaking, he walked out of the classroom with the blind snake. At this moment, Qiu Gangao was sitting on the bed, lost in thought, and the system had not released the task, so he could only follow his own plan. First, control cigarettes to control people's minds economically. Then start the layout. P.S. Brothers. The first 10 minutes is over, and some free data will be updated awesome. Chapter 9. Why don't you get out of here? 9 updates. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dami and the blind snake kneeling on the ground panicked and they heard the killer bear scurrying away. In some case, the killer bear was afraid of Qiu Gangao's threat. But as they looked at the person lying on the ground, they understood that he was now the god of killing, and who could be afraid? Only they knew for themselves how fierce Qiu Gangao was, and no one could move under his command. Their spare time looked at Qiu Gangao's back and they knew from the bottom of their hearts that he had not exerted all his strength, otherwise none of their little brothers could have survived. Qiu Gangao looked at the prison guard in front of him, speechless. These despicable things were still standing here, and then he spoke to the prison guard at the door. Don't you get out of here yet. As soon as the words fell, an invisible pressure rushed towards them. The prison guards were so scared that their feet became weak. Even their leader, the assassin Xiong, couldn't resist Qiu Gangao, let alone himself. The prison guard who had just opened the door quickly kowtowed and said. Yes, yes. Let's go, go now. After speaking, he rolled out of the prison room with those prison guards crawling around. On the side, An and his companions watched as Qiu Gangao opened their eyes wide and looked at his back with an incredulous expression. I sighed in my heart, is this still the proud brother we know? Qiu Gangao turned around and walked towards the A1 group. Seeing their surprised expressions, he said calmly. Are you surprised? After speaking, he spread out his hand. An asked with a surprised expression on his face. Aoj, I never saw you so fierce when I was at the police station. He smiled slightly, and a hint of malice flashed through his eyes without anyone noticing, then he laughed and said. You know, I don't like to show off. Everyone knows Qiu Gangao's personality, he doesn't like to show off, and his style of behavior is the same, not too flamboyant. So they didn't doubt anything either. He walked up to the 5 people, glanced at the crowd, and said word by word. I said I would take you out of Stanley. I will definitely not break my promise. After speaking, he looked at the crowd. An and the others exchanged a glance, with a smile on their lips and a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Different voices and the same voice. Aoj, we believe in you. Qiu Gangao nodded slightly, then looked at the kneeling Dami and blind snake, and said calmly. You two come over here. Dami and the blind snake heard his words and without saying a word, they climbed up to his feet and quickly spoke. Ao Gu, no, not Aoye. Ay, we know we're wrong. In the future, if you ask us to go east, we will never go west. From now on, the 2 of us will be your dogs. Whatever you say is what you say. The blind snake quickly agreed. That's right. We will all listen to you in the future. There's no way. The just battle has completely shattered the confidence of both of them. And Qiu Gangao's imposing demeanor. And the two of them were not originally mentally determined individuals. Qiu Gangao nodded slightly when he heard their words and said in a flat tone. This is just a warning. Next time, don't say I didn't give you a chance. Dami and the blind snake were overjoyed when they heard his words. They knew that Qiu Gangao was giving them a chance, so they quickly kowtowed to him. While kowtowing, he kept talking. Ay, there's no next time. At this point, they have no idea of revenge anymore, they haven't lived enough yet. Qiu Gangao said slowly without any ripples in his eyes. From now on, it's up to me. The two quickly nodded and agreed. Yes. Ding. Congratulations to the host for completing the task. Obtain the reward, Loyalty-I, which allows you to check your loyalty. The skill can increase your subordinate's loyalty by 20 points. Loyalty above 80 points is very loyal, above 90 points can even block knives and guns for the protagonist, above 95 points, ready to die for the protagonist at any time. Upon hearing the introduction of the system, he was overjoyed. This is a good thing. With it, he can build an iron barrel-like group. With the Eye of Loyalty, his plan can also be accelerated. Then he withdrew his thoughts and looked at Dami and the blind snake. With a thought, a word appeared on his head. Dami, Loyalty. 40 points. Blind snake, Loyalty. 45 points. Suddenly, the system prompts. Due to the host's use of force to make them submit, they are not sincere and have a 50% chance of defecting. He listened to the system's prompt and sneered at the corners of his mouth, removing the Loyalty-I's 20 o'clock mark, and they were only around 20 o'clock. However, he didn't care. In his eyes, these people were all the same whether they existed or not. Anyway, he wants to form his own power. These short mules are not of much use either. Later, he withdrew his thoughts and launched a loyal eye towards On and the others, still curious about their loyalty. Not bad, they all have a score of over 80, but what surprised him the most was A1 and Bao Zhu, who actually have a score of over 90. However, with the opening of the Eye of Loyalty, their loyalty skyrocketed to 100 points. He knew that even without the bonus of loyalty, they would not betray themselves. Then he closed his loyal eyes and secretly thought to himself. Next, let's see what tasks the system releases. In the department head's office. The killer bear walked into the office, holding onto the baton tightly and slamming it fiercely onto the table, one stick after another, until it overdrawn. He just threw away his baton, propped up his desk with both hands, his eyes filled with anger, and the scene just now appeared before his eyes. Remembering his own incompetence, he suddenly piled up the folders on the table and roared angrily. Bastard! Then a hint of killing intent appeared in his eyes, and he gritted his teeth and said. Qiu Gangao, wait for me. Remember today's Qiu Laozi. I am the boss here. How dare you threaten me? This vengeful assassin, Xiong, writes upside down. Even Qiu Gangao dared to threaten himself without even thinking about it himself. But it doesn't matter, I have plenty of opportunities to make his life worse than death.